I'm delighted to be back in Vienna. It's just a short stay this time. How many of you attended the lecture I did a year ago here? Yes. Well, welcome back to you too. And this is, it's beginning to look familiar here. I just love the place. You have such a wonderful, wonderful city to call home. And I'm also delighted to have the opportunity to be the voice of developmental science for you here this evening with regards to the family. I think we have a problem all over Western civilization with regards to supporting the family, because the sense of the importance of the family is an intuitive thing. And intuition is knowledge without words. And that is a problem. If culture is right, if culture is supportive, we have this sense of things, this intuition, but we don't have the words to go along with it. And if we don't have words, we can't bring it into a consciousness. We don't have a language, we can't inform policy. And so we are left here with many of us, by far the majority, with intuitions knowing that something is not right. The family is absolutely the essential unit of society, absolutely required. If the family is not the context in which to raise children, everything starts falling apart. And indeed has, but we don't have the words for it. And unfortunately, developmentalists, scientists have been using very esoteric language that's not easy understood. And so it's not accessible to the individuals who now need to know this. Because again, without a language, we do not have a collective consciousness. Without that, we cannot inform policy. So hopefully I can make a little contribution tonight. Like Mozart and the story of Mozart, I don't know whether I put the picture together in a good way or not. My job is to put the pieces together. I'm a theorist, it's what I do. I've studied the pieces of this puzzle for many years. And so I'm going to simply put it together very briefly for you this evening of when all the pieces are put together from developmental science, what does it look like? And the way we start now is much different since we now understand something about children and how they are meant to develop. We can start from children rather than from adults. In times past, we always start from adults. Well, you know what is good for adults? And all adults always have this idea that you have to work at things directly. And so the idea is if you want a child to be like this, you want a child to be like that, you try and shape him like this. Well, if you try to do that with the plants in the garden, you'd be the worst gardener ever. If you tried to shape a carrot to look like a carrot, it would nurture nobody. It would be artificial. And it's totally artificial. People today are trying to shape caring. And yet if you care, if it doesn't come from the place truly, it nurtures no one. In fact, it's the essence of narcissism when you care for selfish reasons. And so you can't work at this directly, it's indirectly, and that's what family was for, is to create that context. And hopefully, again, I can make sense of it again for you tonight. So from a developmental perspective, well-being, which is very much of a buzzword in Europe, as I understand it, when I was asked to talk in various capacities in terms of the European Union, at Lisbon and the family platform and other places, well-being is very much the buzzword. That from a developmental perspective, well-being is best defined as the degree to which human potential is fully realized. And so it has to do with us becoming as fully human, considerate, as civilized, cultured as possible. And the term raising children, actually in the English language, I don't know if it carries it over in the German, But to raise children literally means to bring them to their full potential as human beings. So this is our responsibility. So what does this mean? How is this done? What are the conditions? What is the role of the family? What is the role of the state? Can indeed the state raise children, or is it only something that can be done in the context of families? But first of all, let me begin by asking the question, what does it mean to be fully human? What does it mean to be fully human? There are three sides to this. Three sides. One is quite obvious. We're all born very dependent, not at all able to function on our own, not at all a separate being, no separate boundaries, and the yearning of development, the yearning is to be capable of functioning as a separate being, walking on one's own 2 feet, thinking for oneself, making one's own decisions, being able to have boundaries. And in fact, unless one does become a separate person, one never regards the separateness of others. This is absolutely foundational to the spirit of democracy. One of the great concerns now is individuals are not realizing their potential as separate beings, and so there is no regard for the separateness of others. And there is a concern that children are not coming into this potential. Childhood, of course, should be a time when we make the greatest reach towards this potential. And so able to function separately and independently. Another side to this is absolutely innate in our humanness, and that is to be able to adapt to what it is that we cannot change. In fact, even more than that, when we're up against that which we cannot change, humans have the potential to actually be transformed by that. And so we are the most adaptive of all creatures. Of all creatures. It requires a process, though. We'll look briefly at that. We are meant to be changed by that which we cannot change. In neuroscience, we now call it neuroplasticity. The brain can find workarounds around the various glitches and problems. It can heal itself. There can be recuperation, and so on. We're finding a lot of our children are not developing this resiliency, are not adapting to their world. Something is amiss. Of course, of great concern, always a concern for us, is our potential as a social being. This is not simply to get along, to be nice, to be kind. In fact, our potential is much more than that. Our potential is to be able to seek togetherness at the same time as to preserve our separateness. And preserve our separateness, our separate thoughts and ideas and so on, without destroying the union or community. And in other words, to be true to oneself, to have integrity, but with diplomacy. Now, this takes a long time to develop. Many adults, when they're diplomatic, lose their integrity. And when they have integrity, lose their diplomacy. You know how hard this is in marriage, those of you that are married. How do you have togetherness and separateness simultaneously? Maybe it would take a few lifetimes to actually realize our potential on this. But children are supposed to make tremendous progress on this. This is what leads to this. The fruit of this is children who are civilized, responsible, considerate, respectful, and have the spirit of democracy coming deep from within them, egalitarian relating. Again, we're having difficulty. Many of our children, many adults in our society are not realizing their potential. There's no true spirit of democracy. They know the form, they know when to vote, they know to do this, but they have no spirit of place where they treat others as with respect, with considerateness, and so on. And so the issue here is, in looking at this and putting the pieces together, we find that there are some very basic, irreducible needs that must be met for children to become fully human. This is not automatic. It's not just a matter of age and stage. It's not a matter that a child is 6 years old and is capable of this. All of the delinquents I worked with were failing in realizing their potential. Many adults today are failing in realizing their potential. Robert Bly, the poet laureate, informally so, of United States, wrote a book called Sibling Society and said, the epidemic of our time is we're not growing up. We are not truly maturing to realize our potential. Something is wrong in this. And so we take a look, what is necessary? What is necessary for children to become fully human? And so first of all, again, if we take a look at these things, we put as the first that we need to actually grow up. We all grow up physically. We can't help it. We all grow older physically. We can't help it. We just don't all grow up. And that's a very, very different issue. Somebody can be 50 years of age, and it doesn't really mean that they're any more mature than a 16-year-old. And now we can take pictures of the brains, and the delinquents I worked with had actually brains, the part of the brain that is meant for civilized and considerate behavior, that wasn't any more mature than a 4-year-old. They were not growing up. And immaturity is a primary problem. It's not a matter of school, of teaching. It's an actual matter of maturity. You can see this in the plants. The plants, there are seasons. There has to be conditions for them to come to fruition. So they need to grow up. So how do we grow up? What is the process of growing up? Again, to make a very long story short, it's a matter of, again, of growth, and we put the various potentials up there, and we find for each of these potentials there is actually a growth process. They're called by many names, by many theorists, and I will try to choose the name that makes the most sense here. The first process is that which is responsible for having us emerge as separate beings, venturing forth from home base when our attachments are secure, and I'll go over this again, but it's an energy form. I often get asked by parents throughout the years, how do you get a child to dress herself? How do you get a child to all kinds of things? I say, well, does a child want to dress herself? They say, well, I told her 1,000 times to dress herself. No, you didn't hear me. Does the child want to dress herself? Well, I don't know. Well, that's pretty important, because this is an energy form. If there's no luxury of emergent energy, there's no venturing forth. The child is not curious about the things that he's not attached to. If the child isn't wanting to do things himself, to become his own person, to have his own ideas, there is nothing you can do to make it happen. You can try and create a form of it from the outside, but it is not spontaneous. It is a spontaneous process that must be there to become separate, distinct, and unique, and indivisible, so that there's only one of you, one that looks, that sees the world as you do, that relates to the world as you do. It is a place of uniqueness and distinctness, viable as a separate being. And it's a process. Many do not show this. Many do not show the fruit of it. There are many individuals who are living in this world who have no energy to do this. In fact, the greatest indication of a lack of emergent energy in an adult or a child is boredom. And boredom is epidemic in our society, and it's escalating. In English, the word to bore means to bore a hole. And it's the actual feel of a hole inside of one in which children say, I'm bored. And that is huge. Emergent children who are filled with emergent energy are rarely bored. And so we know that something is amiss. We know it is amiss. The adaptive process. The adaptive process is a phenomenal process. Again, it is spontaneous. It happens, but it's not inevitable. Every single child is born with the potential to emerge as a separate being. Every child is born with the potential to adapt to circumstances and situations they cannot control. How is this done? This is done basically, we evolve, we develop as a result of encounters with futility. But here is the thing. Futility is when we're up against the things we cannot change. Futility has to do with the futility of an endeavor, something we cannot fix, something that doesn't work. We can't change the weather. We can't change time. When mommy says, no, I'm not reading you another story tonight, that's an encounter with futility. Encounter with futility is when you can't be best all the time. You can't be first all the time. You can't get your way all the time. An encounter with futility is when mommy and daddy say no or take something away on you, or when they're having a baby and you can't send the baby back into the womb from whence they came. And these are all encounters with futility. Now, it turns out that the encounters have to be, that adaptation is an emotional process, and futility has to be felt. The interesting thing that we know about futility is all emotions have a body language, especially for the young. And that's how we can tell the emotions they're feeling. And when a child feels the futility of an encounter, when they're up against something they cannot change, the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain, actually the command center, the amygdala, sends signals to the lacrimal glands and the eyes water. And so tears of sadness and disappointment, tears of futility, have been part of human civilization for eons. The Greeks called the big futilities in life tragedies, and tears were always a symbol of this. This turns out to be key to our adaptation. Children need to have their tears, their sadness and disappointment about the things that they cannot change in their life if their brains are to remain plastic, if they are to evolve. In encounters with futility, the ultimate is our griefs, our losses, our lacks. And of course, I've been a therapist for years. I've never seen anyone suffer a major loss and recover from it without a sea of tears. This is part of our human process. We are losing this. Our children are becoming tearless. They are not evolving. We are calling them entitled because they have to get their own way. They have to be best. They are pushing at things. We have lost our way in this. Another one is the integrative process. This is all the talk in neuroscience now. And this is also the oldest thought in developmental psychology, is that conflict is the motor of development. And Piaget's theory, if you recognize his name, was a theory of cognitive dissonance, that what created mature thinkers is the ability to think conflicting thoughts. Part of me thinks this way and part of me thinks that way. And when I'm able to have the conflicting thoughts, I'm able to develop depth in my conceptual understanding. And now we know that even more important is to have mixed feelings. A child must feel. It must be able to get to the place where they can feel both excited and scared. They can feel both affection and frustration. They can see both the dragon and the treasure. They can feel both their alarm and their desire. Now, that isn't even possible before 5 years of age. There's not a 4-year-old in the world who can say, part of me feels this way and part of me feels that way. I am rather conflicted today. I have double emotions. And Mommy, I really like you, but sometimes I get so mad at you. There's not a 4-year-old in the world. The problem is there's a lot of 40-year-olds who can't say that. And they're black and white in their thinking. They don't understand irony. They don't know anything about a metaphor. They don't even know that you're saying the opposite of what you mean. They don't get dry humor. And there are so many of those that are now not growing up. We know that that is a function of the mixing things in the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the mixing bowl, and the corpus callosum, which is the bridge between the hemispheres of the two brain hemispheres. This is growing through conflict. So, how do these things happen? What is required for the child to emerge as a separate being, the emergent process to be there, for the adaptive process, for a child to feel sadness when up against the things he cannot change, and to experience the conflicting feelings and ideas and become a true social being? What causes this? And it's obviously clear. It used to be thought that the potential of humans was the role of the school. And the school was the arm of the state. And you taught people to be mature. You can't teach anybody to be more mature. You can't teach a plant, no matter how much you talk to your geraniums. You can't talk them into growing up. You cannot talk. This is spontaneous. It's not a matter of teaching. And it's not genetics. It's not genetics. This is a result of true maturation, again, which is spontaneous but not inevitable, is the key to becoming fully human. And the fruit is profound. It is profound. This is the kind of thing we would all want our offspring to be characterized by. The emergent process gives the fruit of viability as a separate being, full of vitality, not easily bored, a sense of agency at the steering wheel, and a sense of responsibility, full of interest and curiosity. Do you know there's more children curious in kindergarten than there are in the last grades of school? Something is wrong with our society. Our school system is predicated upon the fact that all children are curious by age 6. You're lucky if you have a handful of children in a class at age 6 that even show characteristic curiosity. And if you reinforce curiosity, if you clap your hands when a child shows curiosity, it makes it go away. You cannot teach anyone to be any of these things. You can teach a child like this many things. It's not a matter of modeling. You can't get this from modeling. You can't get this from learning. You don't get it from genetics. This is a result of maturation, venturing forth energy, a relationship with self, and a strong quest to become one's own person. The adaptive fruit is amazing. The child is resilient, resourceful, can recover from trauma, can benefit from adversity. And what's so important to understand is they can learn from consequences. Many people think that children simply learn from consequences when they can link in the cerebral cortex, the thinking part of the brain, cause and effect. That's not the way it works. A consequence is a confrontation with futility. Unless a child feels sad about getting a poor mark, unless a child feels sad, actually feels sad about something not working, a consequence that is there, they do not learn. They do not adapt. That is why so many children are not learning. They don't learn from consequences. That was a huge mistake that adults made by thinking that we're logical. We're not. Adaptation is emotional. You might know that your spouse died. You may know your father died. It doesn't mean you'll ever adapt. You might know the futility of ever making contact with a lost one, with a person who's rejected you. You have to grieve it. You have to feel the futility. Your adaptation will be a result of tears. Children only have tears. The state can't provide any place for this. No place is safe. School is not safe for this. It is a tearless place, and if there are any tears, it would be shamed. There's nothing the state can do this. This is for family alone, and only family can do this. The fruit of the integrative process, well-tempered, considerate, civilized, balanced, appreciates context, sees perspective, egalitarian values. Wouldn't you like someone to write a reference for your child like this? Would not, even if 1 out of 10 people in our society, 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, had a modicum of this maturity, it would revolutionize, it would change our society. It would be phenomenal. So where do we get these? We all have this potential. We all have this potential. Where do we get it? How does it happen? Does it happen in school? No, it doesn't. Can we make it happen? No, we can't. No, we can't. So what is the answer? The answer, I'll fill it out to you as far as we understand in developmental science. Before they can truly mature, they need to become deeply attached, exactly the same as our plants. They need to become deeply attached to an adult who assumes responsibility for them. So before we see the maturity, the part of the plant that's above ground, before we see the fruit of the process, it's what's underneath that is most important. But you see, what's underneath we've never had to talk about, because when it works, it works. And so this is where we have intuitions, but we have no words. And so we haven't. And this is why it is the job of developmental science to spell this out. And when I put all the pieces together, it seems that there are 6 different routes. The first one is simply the route through the senses, to seek contact and closeness, proximity, through being with, through being in sight, in smell, in sound, in touch. This is such a profound and preeminent need that it has now shaped the digital revolution. We have finally invented digital devices. We've been able to code information into ones and zeros. So now we can transmit information, store information. Now we can do this. It ushered in the information age, but it turns out that information about the world is not what children or adults were interested in. What they're interested in is the most important thing of all, is, am I liked? Am I liked? Do I matter? Am I significant? What do you think of me? Am I important? Am I loved? And it all has to do with the issues of proximity. And so we found digital devices to be able to do this, to keep in contact, to text, to SMS, to cell phone each other. And now the average teenager sends over 4,000 SMS messages a month. And all over, the average teenager today spends up to 10 hours a day on the internet. And we have an explosion. Why? Learning about their world. Learning about their world, or seeking information about attachment. The second is sameness. By the time a child is toddler, they are seeking to be, they're trying to be close through being the same as, being like. And this is where language is acquired. A child begins to walk like you, talk like you, begins to dress like you. Sometimes it's embarrassing. But all of this is to be able to stamp our form. This is natural. There's a problem here, is that we're sending our children away from us at this age. They took a look at each other, their peers, and they think they belong with their peers. And they're starting to talk like their peers, act like their peers, dress like their peers, because they are predisposed to attach to those who look the same as them. This is a new phenomenon that I talk about in my book, Hold On to Your Kids, a brand new attachment disorder. It never occurred before 60 years ago, until after the Second World War. This never existed. Children took on the form of their parents and their grandparents, dressing like them, talking like them, acting like them, and culture was transmitted. Now children are taking on and are doing this, and it's pulling them out of orbit around the adults that are meant responsible for them. And so we're having trouble in the attachment universe. By the 3rd year of life, if all goes well, the child interprets closeness through being a part of, and that is belonging. And again, we're getting this wrong in our society, that children belong with those of the same age. They never had. Not throughout the tens of thousands of years of our civilization. They've belonged and been a part of families of those who are responsible for them. That is where they belong. And loyalty. On the wake of this, the child interprets as closeness as being on the same side as. Being on the same side as, taking the side of, protecting and defending, to serve and obey. These are the powerful instincts of loyalty. And again, many of today's children are being more loyal to each other than they are to their mothers and fathers and grandparents and uncles and aunts. This is distortion in the universe of attachment. If it happened in our universe, if the planets started revolving around each other rather than the sun, we would have chaos. And this is the chaos we're experiencing now. All the evidence is that children were meant to orbit around the adults responsible for them. That's the main thing, not around each other. And this is becoming a problem. And this is in our pure-oriented society. And so now we're having adults who make policies and decisions who are simply thinking of the connections between other adults and this, and not at all understanding that children need to be embedded in these attachments. By the fourth year of life, it's very clear to a child if everything is okay. The problem is many children do not get through the superficial levels anymore because there's too much disruption. If there's disruption in the plants of the roots and the roots can't hang on, there is no maturation and there is death. There is certainly psychological death for our children, not physical death. But if everything is okay, and this tentative root can come down, the child interprets closeness as being as mommy and daddy hold close that which they hold dear. So the child wants to be dear to, special to, important to, matter to. And this is our huge drive for significance. This, when you're pure-oriented, you go on Facebook to get this met. 1 billion of our people are going on to get this met in terms of the internet. If everything went as really well, by 5 years of age, the limbic system that is in control of attachments, the emotional brain, opens up all the stops, and the child gives his heart to whomever he's attached to. And this is phenomenal. The heart in almost every culture is a symbol of emotion and vulnerability. This is where you can get easily wounded. When you give your heart away, it can easily be broken. But if everything is going well, the child gives his heart to mom, to dad, to grandma, to grandpa, his heart to the kitty, his heart to whomever he is attached to. His drawings are filled with hearts. And he says, I love you in the most significant way. Over here he said, I love you as an imitation. Here he says, I love you with all of the vulnerability of someone who's given his heart. We were never meant. This is absolutely necessary to create not only the womb, not only create the roots for nurturance to be given, the womb for maturation to happen, but for us to be able to do our job. We were never meant to parent children whose hearts we did not have. We were never meant to grandparent children whose hearts we do not have. There was a time when we knew as teachers that we needed to have their hearts before we had access to their minds. That knowledge has been long gone. Even Socrates knew that. When he was challenged, according to legend, whether or not why a certain student could not learn from him, he simply retorted, I couldn't teach him. He didn't love me. In other words, he understood relationship is the context in which raising children happens and even teaching. Now we have lost that context. We think roles is. The state is a system of roles. Who does what? Who is responsible for that? A child cares nothing about roles. Who is the headmaster? Who is the father? Who is a grandfather? It is nothing about roles. It's all about attachment. Because that attachment creates a context. And if everything goes well, here finally at 6 years of age, the child starts sharing all that is within his heart with those who are responsible for him. And it means that he wants to have no secrets that divide. And this is very important because we can now make sense of the child from inside out. The context for raising children, then, to put it very short, the most important thing we've ever discovered, the thing that would revolutionize our society, bring us back to our senses, is so simple. It's so simple. Children's attachments, not adult roles, create the natural context for raising children and are the true source of our natural power and authority. We can't really work with children who are not attached to us. And they need to feel at home with those who are raising them. To bring out the best in children, their attachment instincts must be engaged before attempting to work with them. That is, the answer for all of this is in attachment. And so even if you have a child, he's your child, and maybe he's got a good relationship with you, you still have to engage the attachment instincts. If you say to your 3-year-old, as soon as they get up, come on, hurry up, you got to get you ready for school, come on, get your clothes on, they'll slow down. They'll actually feel like slowing down. And the more you say, eat your peas, the less they feel like eating them. And so the fact is when you have not engaged the attachment instincts, if you don't believe me, try this with your spouse. Just start ordering them around without ever engaging the attachment instincts and see what happens. They'll work to rule. They'll do the opposite of what you expect. In other words, children were born difficult. We're not taking this into consideration. They were not born to do the will of any adult who thinks that they have the role or responsibility to push them around. They simply were not. Nature took care of protecting against strangers having influence in the lives of our children. By what? By simply making sure that only the ones that children are attached to can have their way with them. That was nature's guarantee. And so anybody that operates out of that, including the school, which has now drifted out of the child's village of attachment, even the school, when a child is not attached to and the school teacher says, do this, the child doesn't feel like doing it anymore. And this is crippling our system because this is the way we're designed. So even with our own children, it would be better that we would engage the attachment instincts. It's so simple, so simple. I have 5 children. Finally figured out how to do this. It is so simple. It's the greeting ritual, the rules of engagement in traditional cultures, even like in southern France and Provence. You can't even do business until you get the person's eyes. And in the eyes, you can see if you're invited to exist in their presence. And so you want to get the eyes to smile. And so you try and get a smile. You smile to get a smile. You say something to get a smile. And then you try to say something to get a nod. It was very mild outside today. It's very nice. You're wearing a purple shirt, and etc., and you get a nod. And we say the most stupid things to get a nod. They're very inane, but the point is we're getting smiles, we're getting nods, and that is priming the attachment instincts. And we're not meant to relate cold with each other. We're meant to be able to prime this. And if you get a child to nod, smile, nod, you get their eyes, and while they're nodding, you ask them to set the table, you're much more successful. Put away their clothes, do this, and if you don't believe me, try this with your spouse. Yes, because these are the rules of engagement. But when you operate out of a role instead of out of a relationship, we lose all our attachment manners. And Facebook is a place in which there is no collecting, and it makes people feel like being mean to each other. Our rules of engagement are, unless we can get the eyes, a smile, and a nod, you don't go a step further because it says it's not safe and you don't have a working environment. We are now trying to work children cold, and the school works children cold. And all the state-based systems are because they're role-based. You get a university degree, you get a certificate, and it enables you now to work with children. That is not the way nature worked. Society has evolved in ways that are no longer synchronized with how we were designed. We've got to come back to our senses and understand this. This is most natural in the context of family, not the state. Not the state. To attach deeply, the third here is to attach deeply and avoid troubling problems. Children need to experience continuous connection. Now we also know when we put all the pieces together, because attachment is our preeminent need, contact and closeness, facing separation is the basic problem of humans. When we are separated from those we're attached to, when we face separation, when we face loss and lack, when we face the rejection of a loved one, when we face the loss of this is the most profound experience. But facing separation can come in all kinds of ways. What happens is it evokes in our limbic system 3 primary emotions: the pursuit of proximity, intense, alarm, and frustration. Now, these are nature's way of fixing the problem. And so when a child is facing separation, maybe you say to the 3.5-year-old, you're wanting to leave a place, they're not being cooperative. Okay, bye-bye now. And then the child panics as you feign separation and pursues you to close the gap. They were facing separation and they do it. We're doing this with our children now in terms of this, which causes deep insecurity with them, but that's nature's way of trying to fix the problem. There's a huge part of our brain and our whole nervous system that is committed to alarming us when we face separation, and it moves us to caution. The problem is that alarm system is very fragile, and if a child becomes too alarmed, there's all kinds of dysfunction that comes with it. In fact, anxiety problems are escalating among our children, alarm problems, various defendedness, agitation-based problems, attention problems, all kind of alarm-based, and frustration. Frustration, it comes whenever something doesn't work. When attachments don't work, the child is frustrated, and frustration is the root of aggression. And aggression is escalating among our children, including self-attack. Suicide rates are escalating and so on, and suicidal ideation. All of these things, what is it telling us? Our children are facing too much separation. And if the separation is too much to bear, the brain has a backup system. It has various defenses that it uses. Now to flight from vulnerability. And there's evidence that our children are losing their feelings. They no longer blush or embarrassed the way they used to. They no longer feel timidity or shame. Many of them can't say, I'm scared. Many of them don't have feelings of sadness. Many of them are saying, I don't care, doesn't matter, whatever. Many of them no longer say, I'm sorry. The delinquents I worked with had 80% fewer feelings than average adolescents. Flight from vulnerability. Many of our children, the nature has a backup system in which you simply can't see what makes you feel bad. We are absolutely naturally inclined to talk about what distresses, to see trouble coming. Many of our children no longer can see trouble coming. They're not moved to caution. They do exactly the things that get them into trouble. Many of our children are moving into alpha position. It's very vulnerable to depend, but that's what children are meant to do, to depend upon those who are responsible for them. And we're giving rise to the most alpha children ever. Children who boss their parents around, tell their parents what to do, that are prescriptive, who have to take charge. We're fooled by this, thinking they're stronger and they're more mature than we used to be. No. They're more defended against dependence. And these children are all over. And the greatest perversion of that is bullying. When you actually are moved to the dominant role, but you're also defended against caring and responsibility. So you establish your dominance through preying on the weak and through taking advantage of the vulnerable, the definition of bullying. And our children are moving into that. and defensive transference, reattaching. When children attach because they can't stand the separation, they attach to routines and things, and attach to peers, attach to other things than the adults. These are giving rise to resistance and oppositionality, anxiety problems. When we look at this as clinicians, all of these diagnoses are increasing among our children. The answer, when we put the pieces together, is they're facing more separation from those attached to. It's unbearable for them. This would be understandable in a time of war, but we're not in a time of war. So what's causing this? Even in a time of war, when a child is well attached to the parents, they can function relatively well. The parents are a mess, but the children are okay. Our children are not okay. There's something that's happening. So to reduce the separation a child faces, the capacity for a relationship needs to be developed fully, and all separation must be bridged. What is nature's answer? Well, nature's answer to not being with is to be like. To not being like all the time is to belong and to take the same side as. And when we can't agree with all the time, at least to be important and significant. And if we can't matter all the time, at least we have each other's hearts. And if the love and affection grows thin sometime, at least we know each other. We know each other from inside out. There's no secrets that divide. Nature's answer is wonderful, but it takes time. It takes time. That's why a child needs time of continuous relationships. In Bali, they had it right. They didn't even let a child, until they were a toddler's feet touch the ground, because now you have likeness. And each one was continuous. We are causing separation very early with children, thinking that we've got to hand them over to the state and outsource our parenting responsibilities because they know better than we do. And what we're doing is we're putting children under the most stress ever. Even if you take a 2 or 3-year-old, the research shows, and they're separated from their parents in daycare or whatever, the cortisol levels spike way high enough to endanger brain development. It makes no sense. The other answer to this is to bridge the separation. That's another way we can do so. This bridge looks not at what divides, but what is there. Bridging is a goodbye ritual. In English, it no longer makes sense, a goodbye, but it used to be in Old English, God be with you until we meet again. It's much, much better in German. Auf Wiedersehen, the bridging ritual of separation. In other words, we intuitively know that we don't face separation well as humans, and children must not. And so the idea is when there's anything that comes in between, I will see you at 3 o'clock, I will see you then. Those of us that have to do a lot of travel, if you're intuitive, you take each one of your children, your loved ones, and you fill it in. I'll see you on Friday, I'll see you on Saturday, we'll do this then. But you must do it. You must put the focus on the return, and that way you hold on to the relationship, hence my title in English, Hold On to Your Kids. You hold on to the relationship, you preserve it. In doing so, you take their face from facing separation. How long are you going to be gone? And you put it into the connection. I'll be home on Friday. I'll see you on Saturday. I'll give you an email then, and you put the focus on this. This is the goodbye ritual. The 2 basic rituals in all of society are the greeting, getting the eyes to smile and a nod before we go and interact. We warm up, we engage the attachment instincts, and when there's a relationship there, we make sure to preserve it by not letting anything get in the way. And that's the bridging. And we're forgetting that. We're forgetting that. And that's only something that intuitively families and parents would understand, that we need to do this. When facing separation, we need to preserve the connection by drawing attention to what stays the same or the next point of contact. This is absolutely essential to reduce the separation. This needs to be done at bedtime for a young child, any kind of separation. But in today's world, what needs bridging is not only this. And I'll give you an example. If you have an intuitive mother and the 3.5-year-old, 4-year-old daughter all of a sudden says, Mother, may something bad happen to you? May you die? You don't say to the child, well, yes, I can see you finally realized your existential insecurity. None of us has control of our life. Yes, I may die, and all the best to you in working that out. That's the last thing we would say. What would we say? We know intuitively you must always bridge it. You never put a child's face into separation. You always put a child's face into connection. The state never does that. It gives ultimatums, contracts to children. As soon as the state is responsible for school, there's all kinds of things. If you don't do this, you won't be able to be here. Separation is the way it does. Why? Because there's no care about this. It's simply manipulative behavior. But what would an intuitive mother say? Very simply, don't you worry, honey. I'll always be your mother. Face into what stays the same. What you don't say is dead or alive, because the child's not ready to handle that. That's true, but the child's not ready to handle that. And that's the point. Problem behavior, that's the same thing. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, I'm going to hold on to you. Nothing will come between me and you. There's not a person in the world that will say that to a child unless it's their mother, their father, their grandmother, because no one has the intuitions to say that. There is nothing that's going to come between us. I'm going to hold on to you. And unless we can support that, our children don't have the context in which to grow up because they're always preoccupied with it. And today's children are becoming preoccupied. That's why they're addicted. In Germany, they found that internet connectivity, digital intimacy, was more addictive than cigarettes and alcohol. Our children are becoming addicted. There is no release. And again, this is the work of family. This is not the work of state. You couldn't possibly do this. There's not one course on student-teacher relationships in any university I know in the world. Not one. And the science is clear that the most significant factor determining the success of the child academically and behaviorally is the student-teacher relationship. But that science is eclipsed. Why? Because the state never listens to that. And so we know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And yet it's role-based. Fourthly, to not get stuck in attachment needs, they need to find rest from the work of attachment. They need to find rest. Now, very simply, what do I mean here? Is the child needs to find what they're looking for. Somebody has to be able to give a sense of significance more than what they're seeking, a sense of sameness. Oh, honey, you're just like me. Oh, we have this in common. A sense of loyalty, taking their side, standing up for them. A sense of togetherness. That's my boy. A sense of endearment, of love and affection. Who's going to do that? Who's going to give more? Who is going to do this? Only someone who's deeply attached to that child, who rises up to be the answer. Because what children need is not people with answers. Children need adults who are willing to be their answer. That is what children require. This has to be answered. Not adults with answers. Adults who are willing to be the answer. This provides rest, and the energy changes to maturation. So children need rest. Children need to find that rest. Why children need true rest? We now know that all true growth emanates from a place of rest. All true growth does. Even physical growth does. That is, physical growth happens when the child is asleep. The brain grows when it's at rest. We as adults put all the value in work. We think that work is the answer to everything, and the school is all about outcome and work and productivity. And everything we know about children is it happens when they're in a state of rest. That rest is facilitated via the parasympathetic autonomic nervous system. There's a whole part of our nervous system. There's one that's the psychology of rest, and one that is the psychology of work. And that's the way we're designed. Restlessness is indicative of the inability to find true rest. It's not a personality trait. Restlessness is escalating among our children. They're often diagnosed. Restlessness is one of the three things that will, if two of three are there, inattention, restlessness, and impulsivity, you'll qualify for attention deficit disorder. And that's escalating among our children. What children need in order to find rest, they need adults that they are attached to do the work of attachment. And who's going to do this work? Who is going to assume responsibility for the relationship, including preserving a sense of connection? Who would do that work? Who would provide an unconditional invitation to exist in their presence? Who would do that work? Who would fulfill their attachment hunger, including the appetites for sameness, belonging, and significance and emotional warmth? We give our estate individuals instructions not to get too attached because it will interfere with what they do. Who is going to do this work? Who is going to provide more proximity, more contact and closeness than the child pursues? This is the work of the family, not the state. Another thing, we have found remarkably that not only do children grow and need rest to grow, but they need to play to grow. This is amazing. This is across all developmental science now. This is huge discovery that it wasn't work. They need play, and not the kind of play that we often call play, like playing electronic games or playing football or playing piano. You can play piano, that is, you can enjoy it you can enjoy the activity and do it for that activity's sake, or you can be looking for an outcome. All of you know when you were practicing piano, when it was play and when it was work. All of you know when you played football, when it was play and when it was work. And electronic games are mainly not play. Recess is mainly not play. Because play, the forward edge of all of this, for all mammals, is play. All offspring of mammals play, and we find out that is essential. If we take away their play, we get disturbance, we get problems, and so on. I believe this is what is happening in many of our countries, for instance in Sweden, where the average one-year-old is spending 10 months in age in daycare. There is no play, there is no rest. The suicide rates are the highest in Sweden of the civilized world of adolescents. The emotional problems are absolutely increasing, and yet Europe is following the Swedish model, believing that this leads to the greatest success. It is at the cost of the children. They're not realizing their potential. What is play? It means to move or operate freely in a bounded space. They need to be contained, and that containment is attachment. It is a spontaneous activity that cannot be taught or commanded. True play has three parts to it. It's not work, it's not outcome-based, it's not for real, it doesn't count, and it's expressive and exploratory. When I was a kid in elementary school, we played marbles, but we had two names for it. I hope it translates into German. We could either play, we called it funsies, or keepsies. Keepsies meant that you played competitively, and at the end you tried to win other people's marbles. And so in funsies was when you played as if you were doing this, but everybody got their marbles back at the end of the day. You either played for fun, or you played for keeps. And you see the two different ways. It was not for real, it was not work. This play was when it was not outcome-based. This is the kind of play that's disappearing. This is a disappearing activity in our children. They are spending way too much time in front of screens, way too much time going earlier and earlier, longer hours to school. Because school is so inefficient these days, they feel they have to do it longer and earlier to get the same results. In fact, it's not working because the conditions are not there for it to work. That is the reason it's not working. Trying harder is not the answer. It's not the answer. This is true play. Why children need to play? Because play is the growing edge of development. They need to find and express their true selves. We now know that this is where the brains are built, that school uses. Brains are not built in school. Information is given in school to solve problems, but that is not where the brain is built to solve problems. Problem solving is built in play. Google was so absolutely fascinated by this result that they decided to mandate that every single Google employee must spend 10% of their work time playing. That is, doing things in which there is no outcome, in which they simply can experiment with things. I would have never put this theory together unless I spent a whole lot of time playing with ideas. It is all a result of playing. And when I was an adolescent and I was classically trained in piano, to finally find that growing edge of me where I could feel expressive, I had to break out of the mold of playing classical piano and finally follow the emotions and get the emotions out. This was play. This was where the expression, this was the growing edge of maturity. But the brains are actually programmed for problem solving in play. It preserves psychological health and well-being. It is where they find their creative edge and their future occupations. Today's children are getting less and less of it. The more the state is involved, the state is all outcome-based, all work-based. Play is a frivolous activity, according to any. Why? Because we need to produce. We need to produce. But every single offspring of mammal need to play. This is the way growth happens. They need roots before they do this. They need rest. They need to practice life in a space free of consequences. They need the freedom to play. They need freedom. They need enough freedom from screens and stimulation. They need enough freedom from structured activity. They need enough freedom from instruction and schooling, and this is absolutely necessary. We are doing this wrong in our society. They need enough freedom from consequences and the work motif. They need enough freedom from working at attachment, because that's what most needs to work. And so they need some adults in their life to do this. To be a buffer in society, to be a buffer, which was always considered the primary role ever since Jean-Jacques Rousseau in 1763. The buffer is the role of parents, not the state. The parents are exactly who is to keep society at bay, to give some room for nature to have its way with our child. Finally, in order to realize all of these things, all of the above, children need to have soft hearts, to feel their tender emotions. They need to do this. We now know that emotion is the engine of maturation, that children need to have their feelings. The problem is when they go outside of the context of those that they're attached to, it's a wounding environment. And they become equipped for a wounding environment. That is why they're losing their feelings. They look cool, but coolness is the new disease of our children. They want to appear sophisticated. They want to appear without emotion. They want to be seen as on all of these, and they're losing their feelings. And the more time they spend in situations outside of the context of those that they're attached to, the worse it gets. Soft hearts are absolutely necessary. We are fragile creatures. We're easily wounded. And we can become defended against our feelings, especially the more vulnerable ones. And so again, we're having an echo of our children. I don't care, doesn't matter, whatever. That don't feel these tender feelings. Children can only attach deeply if their hearts are soft. Also, they can only feel fulfilled and thus find rest if they can also feel empty. A child has to be able to say, I miss. What grade 5 or 1 in the 5th year in school would be able to say, I miss my mom today, I miss my grandmother today? Such a thing is rarely said anymore. Even if it's felt, it is not said. Emotion is the engine of maturation, and so the loss of feeling arrests the maturing process's stuckness is becoming pervasive. And what shields children in wounding environments is a strong emotional connection and a caring adult. The research in this is unequivocal. The ground research was 90,000 adolescents, and the question was asked, this was in the United States, what is the single most important factor that keeps adolescents emotionally healthy, free from at-risk activity, and so on? And the research was absolutely astounding. It was strong emotional connections with a caring adult, because this attachment renders the adults in their life that whatever they think matters more than all the others on the outside. And this enables them to sustain the wounds that they experience in our society without the brain having to defend themselves. So the attachment is not only the source of nurturance, the attachment is also a shield against the external world. And when our children lose their attachments with them, there is nothing to shield them, and they become defended. So we must have the hearts of our children in order to shield them from wounds that are too much to bear. We must have the hearts, but children's hearts belong to the family. That is rather obvious, not to the state. You don't love the state, and the state is not a group. This is in the context of attachments. So to put it all together, the realization of human potential, it is all founded on right relationships, deep and fulfilling relationships with parents or their substitutes, the adults who are responsible for them. If they have that, and their hearts are soft, they are easily moved to their tender feelings of fulfillment, of futility and dissonance. And if there is some rest from the work of attachment, and if they can play, if there's room in their life to be able to have some freedom from outcomes, then we have the wonderful maturing processes of emergence as a separate self, of adapting, being able to adapt to that which one cannot change, and to be able to finally, the brain to bring on the other hand, the conflicting signals together that can create us as considerate, social, and cultured human beings and integrate us in society. To summarize, the well-being of today's children then, and tomorrow's adults, and our future society depend upon our ability to support the family as the womb of true maturation and the natural context for becoming fully human. This is how we have been designed. This has been for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Our society is evolving in ways that no longer support this process, and this is of great concern. We must turn back. According to developmental science, the role of the state should be to do whatever they can do to support families, to do what only families can do, and to allow the child's capacity for relationship to develop fully before requiring the child to be apart from the family. Children need to be able to hold on. And until they really give their hearts to their family, they're not ready to be apart. To work to support the child-parent relationship, reducing the separation a child faces when apart from the family, be it in care or in school. I know these are ideal objectives, but at least these objectives must be set before we can find practical ways of being able to approach them. We'll never be able to approach them, absolutely. We don't live in a perfect world, but at least we've got to get our objectives straight. What is it that we're aiming for? And find a way. And the role of state should be, when they have to interfere with families, only to do so when children are truly at risk, and with the knowledge that the added separation may indeed exacerbate the problems. When the state needs to separate, needs to physically separate children from their parents for whatever reason, neglect and abuse, to remember that there's many ways of being attaching, attached, and you can support other attachments without ever having to be physically close. And until we get that part right, we're just going to continue to escalate the problem of these children as well, the foster children, the many children who require state care. Well, this is a quick overview. I hope what it does, though, I hope my goal of this is that it resonates with your inner intuition. Remember, intuition is knowledge without words. So if you are saying to me this evening, I knew that. I knew that. I didn't have to come tonight. I knew that. This guy didn't say anything I didn't already know. I will be so complimented. I still believe I had a function. Still believe I had a function. Why did I have a function? You may have known that, but may not have had the words for it. You may have known that, but did not know there was a developmental science to support this. And so you don't have the confidence to swim against the stream, the confidence to say out loud the things that are not necessarily politically and correct. You need to know this and to have the confidence of your intuitions. And I believe as we find the words, we can talk to each other. And it resonates with our intuition. Our confidence will grow, and our collective consciousness will grow, and ultimately, from this place, we can begin to influence policy and procedure, and elect those individuals into our government that we believe support the role of family. Because there is no other way that we're going to go to a society that is better than what we have now. Thank you for this opportunity to share these thoughts with you. Hopefully, again, they resonate with you. We will now have a time for questions, I believe, in this.